and we're live with the first episode of Open Source featuring Pirate Nation. This is going to be a show where we kind of unveil what's behind the curtain with different developers in the space. These guys are a fully on-chain gaming behemoth, and I'm a very fan of how they build and how they approach things. And today we have Adam Fern with us. Adam, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and what you do at Pirate Nation.
Yeah, hey, Adam. I am the product lead at Proof of Play. I sort of work on all sorts of initiatives. My job changes, I would say, every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what the top priority is for the company, and just sort of jump onto that thing. So my role is very nebulous, and it's very exciting because I never know what I'm going to be working on.
Jobs changing is like almost a feature within Web3, right? Like, does it change from one product to the next, or do you find yourself as like a product focused person, also having to focus on different aspects of things?
It's across the board. I have worked on every single part of this business since joining in the early days. So I have before we had a designer, I was like working on design work. Before we had any form of analysts, I was the analysts. I have, submitted. I've pushed very. I'm putting a lot of varies in here intentionally. Basic code into the site and into the game. Um, I have like worked on game design features before we had game designers. So I've kind of touched every part of the business at this point. And so my job is just to figure out like what's the biggest fire, what's the biggest and most important thing to work on, and develop a plan and work with the team to make sure that plan becomes a reality.
I mean, it's really sick to hear it from your perspective, because most people just think product guy and they think, oh, probably never touched that or touched this, or like this guy's doing code, he's doing design. And it's something that with the companies that I personally run with, Catalyst with my co-founders and Paladins with Mike, I mean, from Discord tickets all the way to UI design, all the way to creating content, like you end up touching everything.
I spend a lot of time in Discord tickets as well. I'm also a therapist to our community members. Like I'm top of funnel marketing on Twitter. There's no job too big or too small at the company.
It's how long have you been with Proof of Play so far? Because you mentioned like when you joined, right? But it sounds like you've been there really early, like really
Yeah,
early.
so I joined as part of the founding team in February of 2022. So I've been
Okay.
around for quite a bit. I am the third most tenured person at the company after Amit, our CEO, and our art director. So I'm the third most tenured person at the
That's
company.
that's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty early.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, there
crazy.
was no we had a name when I joined, but there was no product of any kind. There was nothing in market. We didn't even have a website. When I would tell my family and friends I was working at this company, Proof of Play, they would like Google it, and there was like no website. And so we put up a very basic website, like to the point where if you were to go to this website, you'd be like, oh, this is a scam company, because it said nothing on it other than like join Proof of Play. And so I can send it to like my family and friends, like, this is what I'm doing, and they would say, this is not helpful at all. This is You might as well have had nothing here at all. I was like, well, at least we have something now. We're starting the SEO early.
How did you find, like, because I'm very open about my Web3 journey with my family, right? Like they all know what I do. My wife watches a lot of my streams and stuff. How did you find that your family received that, like, basically that information of you working for Proof of Play at such a early stage? Was it weird? Were they skeptical? Were they supportive?
I think even today, we spend a lot of time in the space, and I think we all know how niche the industry is. And so they were like, oh, you work at Bitcoin. I was like, no, I don't work at Bitcoin. You can't really work at Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, it's like Bitcoin. I was like, I guess it's kind of like Bitcoin in a way. And so I would try to explain it. I have I have refined and honed my pitch a lot since then. And so I would talk about, its ownership and its game, but there wasn't really anything at the time. So there wasn't really anything to talk about. Like, you work at a game, but you're not a gamer. Like, you don't know anything about games company. I was like, yes. All these things are true. But I've built a lot of products 0 to 1, and all the products that I've worked on throughout my career, I've never really had a background in those things. And that's, I think, part of my strength as a product leader is being able to figure things out quickly, coming in with a forced sense of fresh perspective without saying, oh, I have done this before, here's how we solve it, right? And so everyone talks about first principles, but if you have no other principles to go off of, you're kind of forced to do that. It's really hard when you have priors to work from this first principles framework. But if you have no prior game experience, if you have no prior crypto experience, no prior platform gaming experience, then you have to approach problems in a fresh perspective. And so I think that's like a superpower. Sometimes also, it's helpful to have experience in the field that you're working in, but I also think I like to hire people who don't necessarily have like the background in the field and who have a strong background in analytical thinking and who are able to solve problems and learn quickly. My family was like, okay, Adam's doing another startup. I've worked on startups my whole career, and they're like, what is this one? I've worked in payments, I've worked in, small business lending. I ran a broth company for a couple of years. I worked in mortgages. They're like, okay, now I guess Adam is doing this thing. So they
That's correct.
do, different things when the time suits. And so they were very excited for me, and they didn't really understand the space at all. They still make fun of me because they think, some of them at least think crypto is a scam, which is fine. And others are, excited. I got a bunch of my friends in early to Pirate Nation, like told them, I was like, hey, like I'm working on this thing. They're like, oh, cool. We want to support you. What do we do? I'm like, okay, just mint a pirate, play the game, give me feedback, let me know. And they're really happy now because they've got to see the game and the company progress over the course of, almost 2 years now, because we did our mint back in November of 2022. So they've been around for a while.
That's really insightful, and I think I can relate to developing products that you have no prior experience in, or being in a company that you have a field that you have no prior experience in, and using that as a benefit, because it makes your frame of thought is always more relatable to the masses, right? Compared to the people that are almost like too deep into it. And I get that perspective 100%, because it's something that when I first came into Web3, having both a finance and a fashion background, I was talking to a lot of developers, and I was like, hey man, like you should probably make the UX better this way, or the UI should probably look this way. It would be simpler, easier for people to digest. And it was because of the fact that I had no prior gaming industry experience myself outside of being a gamer. I always look at things from like a shopping perspective, because I'm used to like how quickly can we convert users and things like that. There's something that you mentioned that I think is really important for like the noobs in the crowd, because I know some noobs are going to watch this and they're going to want to learn, right? So you mentioned first principles. Could you explain like what first principles are and your approach to them?
Sure. So the concept of thinking from first principles is just approaching a problem with a blank slate. So it isn't attacking it from, previously written solutions. Like sometimes those solutions are the best ones. And, there's also, you balance first principles with like, don't reinvent the wheel. So these are two things that are sort of diametrically opposed to each other. And so you have to figure out, when do you want to reinvent the wheel and when do you not want to reinvent the wheel? And so it just means like, okay, I have a problem. What are the potential solutions? You sort of burn down the solutions. A lot of the times we have the community asking for things. They're saying, I want thing X. And really you dig into this thing a little bit more and you're like, you think you want thing X, but really you're asking for thing Y, but you're not asking for it. And I have a bunch of examples from this. So recently we had a bunch of people who were asking to export their wallet. We have a Privy integration. They want to export their wallet. And so we could build the wallet export feature, like, of course, like that's something that we can do. But when we dug in, we're like, okay, why do you want to export your wallet? It's because they want to transact on the marketplace. And right now there is no Privy integration on the proof of play marketplace. It's just something we haven't gotten around to because the number of people who use the Privy custodial wallet is smaller. So relative basis, like we just didn't prioritize it against all the other things that we're working on. So we talked to a bunch of these people and we understand like their need. Their need wasn't export the wallet. I mean, that is a way to achieve what they wanted to achieve, but it's easier for us as a company to give them what they want, which is transact on the marketplace with their Privy wallet rather than, build the export wallet feature. And so instead of listening to them and giving them explicitly what they're asking for, we're giving them implicitly what they're asking for, which is they want more power and freedom to transact. And so that's like the first principles thinking, right? It isn't just take a thing and output, it is understand the why behind it and then coming up with the different potential solutions to solve their need.
Yeah, that's really insightful, and it requires a lot of intuition and also knowing the ins and outs of, I guess, the process, right? Like knowing, okay, you can just try to appease the community and basically do exactly what they want, but as many great builders in the past have said, like people don't really know what they want most of the time, and it's having like the intuition to be able to make the right judgment calls to lead the product where it needs to go.
Yeah, there's that famous, I think it's like a Henry Ford quote, and it's like, if we asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. They never would have asked for a car. And
Yep.
so sometimes you need to give people the faster horse, but more often than not, they really want the car and they just don't realize it.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes actually. I reference it a lot when I'm coping a little bit because making those judgment calls is hard, right? Like you might have people that are kind of like knocking down your door asking for thing A, you have to give them thing B, but it's like a lonely, awkward road in between delivering thing B because sometimes it takes a couple months or a little longer than thing A would. So yeah, it's like my cope quote.
It's a good one. It's a really good one. It's a really good one.
I would, and I want to bring it back just a little bit to ask, like, proof of. You mentioned working on proof of play from the beginning, right? For those people that aren't familiar with proof of play or Pirate Nation's history, like, how did that happen? Was proof of play always the plan, and Pirate Nation just kind of came out of that, or was it always like both things part of the plan?
So proof of play. So Amit, our CEO, along with a bunch of co-founders, the goal was to build a decentralized game engine infrastructure. And the reason behind that was Amit was one of the co-creators of Farmville, and he had just seen that a couple years prior, Take-Two, which had acquired Zynga, which had acquired his company, they shut down Farmville, this game that had like hundreds of millions of hours of gameplay and billions of hours invested in time and money, and they just like rugged it. They just fully rugged it because they didn't want to have to support Flash. And so he said, I want to build a game that lives forever. And he's been interested in the decentralized technology for a while. He was building an NFT marketplace. I believe he started around the same week as OpenSea in 2017, potentially. I think that was the year. And the technology wasn't there yet. The users weren't there yet. But he has been like really interested in this tech for a really long time. And so he wanted to build a game that could sort of outlast him, outlast the company. And so that was the initial kernel. Pirate Nation was the idea that sprung from the concept of building a fully on-chain game. And so we knew that in order to prove out the technology, we needed a killer app. A lot of teams in the space focused on infrastructure, and infrastructure is really important. But if you don't have an application that shows what the infrastructure can be used for, it's hard for people to sort of grok. So our thesis as a company, a little bit different from some of our peers, is that we needed to build a mass market application that showcases and is a proof point for the underlying technology. So the company is effectively modeled after Epic Games. Amit used to work at Epic Games in the really early days. He reported to Tim Sweeney when the company was super young. He worked on the first version of the Unreal Engine on Gears of War and Unreal. And the concept there is like the Unreal Engine powers their gameplay. And the more popular their games become, the more game developers can see it, the more engineers who look at this product are like, oh, wow, I can build a game that looks that good using this engine, and it drives business towards the engine at Unreal. So the consumers power it's basically the top of funnel marketing budget for the devs. And so we're following a similar strategy. We're not trying to build a visual engine, we're building a state engine, so a back-end engine. However, like we believe that without an application, it's really hard to pitch your infrastructure. So we're trying to build Pirate Nation into a mass market casual game that other game devs can see. They're like, oh, that game is successful. How are they doing it? What are they doing? And then it will lead them naturally towards proof of play and towards the game engine that we've been building and developing, which powers the game. So we have this, this virtuous loop. And every time we make improvements to the game, the engine gets better. And every time we make improvements to the engine, the game is able to get better. And so they reinforce each other.
That's very synergistic, and I can tell you that it's working. Like, I know as we talk more about fully on-chain gaming, Pirate Nation is always the first one that comes up, and then when I talk to like game dev friends of mine, they're always like, "Hey, are they offering?" Like, I don't think that they get yet that they could actually eventually become a part of like proof of play, essentially, and it makes the fully on-chain gaming side of it easier for them to like integrate into.
So I'll say if you have game dev buddies who are talking about us, tell them, like, connect me to them, tell them to come to our Discord channel. We have a developers like channel. We are actively engaging developers right now who are building on top of our stack. We're building alongside us. They're building features. They're building their own gameplay mini games, and the consumer audience is extremely important to us. Like, we want to build a really fun game that people love and want to play, but we also want to speak to developers and understand how they want to use our technology. The same way the community drives our business strategy on the game itself, so too we want to meet with developers to understand, like, what do game devs need, and it will help us make our engine better, right? It serves our goals of making Pirate Nation better, and also eventually it will serve their goals of building games using our tech. So we are completely open to chatting with these people. We are chatting with them on a regular basis, and in fact, I think we have an alpha builders chat coming up in a little bit, with some of like their closest devs, and we want to bring more people into the inner circle once they show that they're serious about building using our tech.
No, that's insightful, and I definitely will refer those people over to you guys. I think that it's fully on-chain gaming. Like, the one thing that I always think of when you mentioned early is it's the game that can outlast the developer, essentially. And I think with Web3 and the way that the Web3 ethos works, like, that's the perfect place to be. There's so many people that want to do things with games that they're fans of, or maybe a developer wants to move on and almost like let the community take it over entirely. I think that's beautiful in a very like core true to gaming kind of way. Like, eventually the developer could move on and gamers kind of band together and keep this baby alive, this game that they're so passionate about, that they really care about. It prevents games from getting shut down or things getting canceled. And the more fully on-chain games we get, the better, in my opinion, because it could help a developer with getting their community more involved with the building process if people's intentions are in the right place. Have you guys experienced stuff like that with Pirate Nation so far? As far as like, I think when I spoke to Dith, he mentioned there was like 6 or 7 people building on top of Pirate Nation in a roundabout way.
Yeah, that number sounds about right. And we are giving them, we hope, white glove experience, showing them how important they are to us. And we want our developer ecosystem around us to flourish. So they have access to our internal tooling. The thing that we use that creates all of the gameplay that you see, they have access to right now, and they're building on top of. A recent example of what I think is a really cool success is we had a company called GG Quest, and they built a guild product on top of our game where these guilds were competing with each other, and we sponsored the tournament by providing, I think, like 1 billion booty points, and so the winning team split the billion booty points amongst themselves, and those are the sort of things that we want to continue seeing. Like, we haven't built a guild feature in our game yet. We will eventually, but for us, like, think about this completely independent company who has their own needs and wishes and desires. They built a game on top of our game, which enabled guilds, a feature that we don't have access to yet. Because they decided to build this, now all of a sudden, our game has guilds in it. We didn't do it, right? But they built it. And the community has been asking for guilds forever. It's something that is really high priority on our roadmap. So we were able to get guilds for free. The community was able to get guilds. GG Quest was able to learn what's working, what's not working, grow their customer base, grow their company. It's like a win-win-win all around. And this is why we're so excited about the potential for UGC, and particularly extremely excited about Onchain, because we didn't have to do anything to enable this. they could have done this without ever talking to us. They could have built the guilds on top of our game without even knowing that we could be fully unreachable, and they could do this. Obviously, to get the booty sponsorship, they would have to be in touch with us. Like, that's like a business part of it. But from a
Yeah.
technological standpoint, they did this completely on their own. We didn't provide any guidance to them, and they killed it. And we love to watch this. And from us, like, we're, again, like I said, we're going to eventually build a guild feature. We can learn from them. We could see what went well, what didn't go well, what would we tweak. They built an early alpha, and so we can take that in and learn from it. So one thing that we observed is that maybe the guilds were too big. Some of the guilds were, dozens or hundreds of people. So maybe we might say, hey, our guilds are going to max out at 30 people. We think that's going to be the best possible experience. Their guild competition was like 3.5 weeks. Maybe we might say that was too long or that was too short. So we get to come after them and build alongside them a feature that will delight our player base. And so I'm extremely excited about working with developers because they're building such cool stuff.
That's shout out GG Quest, man. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. Rick and Days, they're awesome. And Paladins has been very involved in that scene as well over at Pirate Nation. It's been really interesting kind of seeing this game that I felt like a lot of people were sleeping on, just like build its own cult fandom within the space. It was this thing where like you either like the people that love Pirate Nation in a way that I haven't really seen since like Axie, because as much hate as people would like to give Axie, for example, like there's still that core community that just loves Axie to death, right? And I see something similar with Pirate Nation, obviously different because it's a different type of game, a little more fleshed out, in my opinion, compared to where Axie started. But I do see that same cult fandom that it's like, if you fuck with the Pirates, man, you're all in, And one thing I wanted to ask about, I guess, like the guild side of things and almost like the customer side of things as well, right? And I love being able to ask you this question because you said earlier that you don't consider yourself a gamer. What do you think makes a Web3 gamer? Like, what is in your mind like the ideal Web3 gamer?
I mean, I have two answers. I have the answer that I want to give and the answer that I probably will give. I think, listen, realistically, I do think that there are a lot of people in Web3 who have really good intentions and who are really excited about the prospects of building something new and fresh that hasn't previously existed. I do think this is a potential technological shift. And when I talk about the space to other people, I don't say it's going to replace console gaming or mobile gaming or PC gaming. I think it's just another game mode that some people want to engage with and other people won't, right? Some people only play PC games, they don't play console games. Some people only play mobile games, they don't play console games. So I think it's possible to just find a new type of person. Maybe there's going to be some Venn diagram of overlap between different personas, but this is just going to be different people who want to play this. We're not going to try to convince the PC master race that like Web3 gaming is like the only way forward. We are just trying to build a fun game. And if you like the fun game, whether it's Web2 or Web3, like that's all that matters. And if the game isn't fun, it doesn't matter. So I think I think a good percentage of our community, especially the most loyal and early and biggest supporters, they saw what we were about. They saw that we're really trying something new. We fail publicly, we succeed publicly. We're trying to build something in a very open way, which is really hard to do, right? Building in public is extremely hard. A lot of people talk about it, but being on the other side of it, I can say it's by far the hardest type of business and product I've ever had to work on. Because typically I'm just this like no-name product leader who just like builds stuff, and I'm not accountable to a public community. My my words aren't hung on like when I tweet. I'm just building this thing, and then I talk to 10 people, who are customers, and I say, hey, do you like this thing? Do you not like it? Why do you not like it? And if they don't like it, I'm not getting, hate mail to like at me. And they're just like, I just won't use this thing. So I think there are a lot of good intentioned people who are excited about the future. And I also know there's a lot of people who have like a single goal and motivation, which is extract. And I think that's okay. I don't blame them. Everyone has their own motivations and intentions. Those people are particularly difficult to deal with because they are not necessarily values aligned with what we're trying to build. I think we have a very like pure of heart strategy. We don't play shady KOL games. We don't do things that would keep us up at night. I would theoretically open up all of my Slack and Telegram messages and not be worried if they got on the front page of the New York Times. Like, I feel like we're running a really clean game. And sometimes people don't want that because a lot of people in the space are bringing, a bazooka to a knife fight, and we just like show up with a knife. We're like, we're gonna just, do the thing that makes us feel good and comfortable, and that isn't necessarily aligned with what a certain extractor type cares about, which is just like number go up. And we're focused on building a fun game. We're focused on building like amazing infrastructure that can support uh, other developers who want to build games. And so we are playing the long game. And I think there's some people in the community who are looking at the 5-minute chart. And I don't mean like a token chart. I just mean they're super zoomed in on what's happening like right now. And we have a much longer time horizon. And so the people in our community who are on our time horizon, who are zoomed out and who are seeing the big vision, like, love them. The people who are like looking at the minutia of like the day to day, they serve a purpose, like they're valuable in their own way, but they're difficult to deal with because they're not long-term aligned with us. They'll be gone long before, we either make it or don't make it as a company, which is for us on the multi-year horizon. And I think a lot of the peer companies that we talk to, they're not necessarily thinking as long term, and that's okay, right? I don't fault them. It's just not how we are built and what we're trying to build.
I think I resonate with the long term perspective because it's like key to putting systems in place, right? When it comes to what you want to build, like the systems that you put in place end up influencing the future systems that you also end up putting in place for things later down the road. So I think if you don't think long term enough, it gets really sloppy after a while, right? Because things aren't synergizing the way that they're supposed to. You know, all the pieces within your team, especially in Web3, where we tend to be more of a startup, smaller team kind of culture. Like every second of the workday counts, right? Um, and sometimes the seconds that you wasted last year affect the production of what you're doing this year. So I love to hear that you guys, with the massive undertaking that you're doing with creating a decentralized gaming engine, essentially, and a killer app to propel that forward, you have to be thinking at least 5 to 10 years ahead at all times.
Yep, we're trying. Everyone serves their part in this grander scheme of the plan, and so we need the long term, the medium term, the short term people. Like, they all are valuable to us, and we care about them. Just at times it can be a little bit challenging if we get put on our back foot or playing defense when we're like, hey, just like wait a little bit, and your concern will be handled. Like, we got you, we understand, like, we pay attention, we hear the community, we see the suggestions, we know these things are problems, but we are building a fully on-chain game that, as far as I can tell, there's no one really building at the scale that we're building at, with the number of people that we're building with. And this stuff is just really hard. And like, we're people, and like, we have lives and we have families, and like, I don't work for you. Like, we're working for the company to build this thing into like a behemoth, but it's not going to happen overnight. Like, it takes time to build complicated, great things. And that's what we're doing. We're making sure that we're building deliberately and intentionally, not in a knee-jerk way that is responsive to, like 5 minutes worth of fun.
That actually kind of touches on my next question, where I was gonna ask, like, does the short term ever cause you guys to do like even a small pivot, or you're so dialed into the long term vision that it's just like you find ways to deal with it without pivoting?
I think pivot is a strong word. Pivot to me implies like a change of course. I would say that we absolutely listen to short-term feedback, especially like, we make mistakes. We're human. We don't nail it every time. And sometimes we do something, we're just like, oh yeah, that was a bad idea. And we like undo, right? It's like control Z.
Yeah.
Or like, sometimes we're like, we kind of like missed the mark on that idea a little bit. Let's take it a step further. So we, of course, listen to short-term feedback, and of course we make short-term corrections. And as far as like our long-term plans, we have a public-facing roadmap. It's in Notion. I'm updating it, I would say, once or twice a week. we change our plans based on a number of different factors. So, what we think we're going to launch in 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, it may be the case. Or we might say, based on this data that we're observing or some other thing that we've seen, this is actually no longer important. And we make changes all the time. The long-term plan hasn't changed. Build fully on-chain game, fun game, infrastructure to support devs, like that is all there. How we get there is very much dependent on what we're seeing in the community, what we're seeing in the data, what we're seeing from the market, and what our peers are doing. Like we see good ideas and we're like, oh, we should copy that. That's a cool thing. Like we should incorporate that somehow. We should put our own twist on it. So we're constantly making micro tweaks along the way. And saying that we're like rigid in a long-term plan isn't what makes a successful startup. We know where we're going, but the how we're getting there is constantly changing.
Yeah, that's kind of essentially, I think, the only way to build in this space while remaining dynamic enough to not piss everyone off, but also like dialed in enough that you're not giving away your edge, right? Because I feel like a lot of people do that hard pivot while they're building, and it's like you're giving up so much edge whenever you do that it's terrifying to me, like just to think about as a builder, you know?
I'll give you a really, really simple example. So we're going to be releasing a shared world feature coming up, imminently. That means you're going to be able to see other people in the world. It's going to start out very basic. You're not going to be able to do anything, interact. There's no real social function. It's the building block. It's the base Lego of an interactive universe. Exciting. V1 implementation. We'll see how people react to it, but it is the long-term people are going to understand where we're going with this. They're going to be very excited. In advance of that change, I had lunch with a community member last week, and we were just chatting about this. And he was like, "It doesn't make any sense that one ship, the sloop, sells faster than the other ships. And we're going to we sell skins for these ships, and we allow people to flex on each other. And everyone's just basically sailing around only with a sloop. We have 100% sailing with sloops because they're super fast, and the other ships just sort of get relegated." And we were chatting about it. I was like, "You know what? You're right. We made that change yesterday." Right? It was a small micro tweak. It wasn't on our roadmap, but it came out of an insight with a lunch with like a valued community member who said, "You know what? I think you should make this change." And what is that going to do for us? It means that there's going to be more variety in the world. It isn't just going to be 100% of people sailing around the sloop. It's going to be more fun for those people sailing. It also means we'll be able to sell additional ship skins for the different ship types. Because right now everyone's like, "I want a sloop because I'm only going to be in a sloop and I'm going to flex on people in my sloop." Now they'll have a frigate, they'll have a galleon. And so like that small tweak may have a meaningful business impact. Also, it's the right thing to do. And so we're constantly looking at the feedback and we're evaluating our priors and making updates and changes accordingly.
Man, you're having lunch with your fucking community members. That's pretty cool.
I mean, that day, I actually had lunch with one community member, and then I met up with another for coffee. I think, I was trained to be a PM that is really in touch with my customers. Like our customers and our players are our superpower. And the closer of a relationship I can have with them, the more I can understand their needs and their wants, and the more effectively I can advocate on their behalf with the game team, with the platform team, right? Like I work through other people. So I hear ideas and I try to cherry pick the best ones and I try to get them prioritized and built in-house. And I think one thing that makes us really special as a company is that we really do engage with our community. We really do listen to them. I know a lot of people pay lip service to that idea, but I think it's something that we do extremely well. We hear them, their pain, their successes, and we want to make sure that to the extent it's possible that they're happy all the time. Of course, it's not always possible. And like sometimes we're going to make decisions that are unpopular. And I think that's also okay. Like we have to make principled, correct decisions. But having an ear to the community is one thing, but building real meaningful relationships is another thing. And I would actually say I would go a step further. A number of these community members, which let's say started as customer development, I think have like transitioned beyond that, right? Where like I value their opinion. They become advisors to me in an unofficial capacity. I go to them when we're working through particularly difficult problems to understand how they would approach it, why they would approach it differently. Because my perspective as a builder player is one thing. Their perspective as a pure community member is another. And so it's important to blend all those perspectives together in order to get to the right answer.
That's very insightful, and I think that's fundamentally, at least in my mind, what makes Web3 so different from other industries. Because I don't know what your products. You mentioned earlier you would typically ask like 10 people. You didn't have to deal with hate mail. You didn't have to deal with so much feedback coming in. But do you think that the bonds you're able to make with the community members or potential customers in Web3 are even stronger because of the building in public nature and that aspect of the industry?
So, I've known many customers in past work that I've done, but I wouldn't say it went beyond the 30-minute call or the 1 hour call where I was like, "Hey, I'm working on this feature. What do you think about it?" Whereas I think the relationships that are being built here have like one level deeper. One of our top community members, he's like one of our best creators, this guy, Pirate Master Murdoch. Actually, it's funny, I don't actually know his real name, which is
Free
kind of
Murdoch. I'm
yeah.
glad he got his account back.
Yeah, I'm glad he got his account back as well. He came to New York. I was unfortunately out of town. Otherwise, I would have 100% met up with him. But I sent him a bunch of recommendations for where to eat. I've never recommended any prior customer like a list of places to eat while they're in New York for a couple of days. And to me, like I felt like that was important, right? He's been so important to our success. He's grown his creator like skills and his account, and we love that. He's been an advocate of ours since like day one, basically. And like the very least I can do is like help him have a couple delicious meals in New York. And like to me, that was like my service back to him. And and I find myself doing things like that for other community members as well. And it doesn't feel like a compulsion. It feels like the right thing to do.
That's what did you recommend him to eat, if you don't mind me asking?
I sent him to a couple of my favorite pizza places based on where he was in the city. He was like staying around like Times Square, which is like kind of a
Okay.
rough area, but I was like, you should go to these places. They'll be good. I
Yeah,
don't know.
cool.
I don't actually know if he went there or not. He never followed up. So I feel like if you're listening to this, Murdoch, I want to know which places you went to.
All right, guys, you already know if you're in the Pirate Nation community and you need pizza recommendations, Adam's got you, man. and you no, go ahead.
This is my service to the community. This is what I offer. In addition to building the game.
uh, you mentioned Murdoch, and whenever I think of Pirate Nation community, he's literally the first person I think of, right? I have a ton of respect for how that guy reps Pirate Nation. And what would you say is like what are what makes him different as far as like what does a person like him gain from getting in early? And what do you see that parallels between him and other community members as far as their interest on getting in early on a game or ecosystem like Proof of Play and Pirate Nation?
I think we have a lot of community members who joined around the same time as him who have been extremely important in helping to shape the company and like the roadmap and the gameplay. But for someone like him, a creator who jumps onto a game early, if that game becomes successful, it's sort of a rising tides lifts all ships situation. And so he's like the go-to. Like we will shout him out. We will talk about him. We'll like put his materials in our public facing stuff because we want to showcase the love. Like he's been around, he was hosting Twitter spaces forever when there was like 5 people in them. And it was like seemingly to us, we're like, this guy's delusional. What is he doing? There's like 5 people in these spaces. He shows up every Monday, like without fail. It doesn't matter how many people are there. And like that sort of loyalty, like he believed in something, right? He saw something that others didn't see. Like at the time, and this is not a metric that we really care about or track, but at the time, like the Pirates were like $40. You could buy one for $40. And like which in Web3 people equate value of asset price to value of company and like successfulness, which I think is false in my view. But this guy was like around us when we had like nothing. We had 200 players for almost a year, 300 players, and he was one of them. And he was showing up every week saying like, here's what changed this week. That sort of loyalty is hard to beat. We had a bunch of creators join later in the cycle, and they're great in their own way, but we'll never forget the people who were early. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong on here. Bryson got his start because he was one of the first Axie creators, right?
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
So Bryson made a
Most
name.
people with like more than 60K in Web3 gaming as far as follower count started with Axie.
So right, so like Bryson became a name as a result of being a part of the right game at the right time. And so that's an example. Again, I'm really happy for Bryson. Like he helped Axie, Axie helped him. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. We want to lean in more heavily to our creator ecosystem. So we have the players, right? We have the builders, and now we need to start courting and chatting with creators because it's something that will help us and help them as well. So we're really excited to start talking to more creators and deepen those relationships. And we're going to be doing some things in the near future that show them how much we value them, including hosting sort of like fireside chats with the dev team so they can really understand what we're doing, where we're going, give them a little bit of alpha so they are more effective as creators. And we're excited to kickstart those programs pretty soon because we know we need to give them a little more love than they're getting today.
That's great to hear. I've always love that aspect of the creator to game relationship. I was talking to Max over at Neon Heroes the other day, and he's like, we want creator, like the term that he uses, we want to create like the next ninjas for our game, right? Like, because they're a shooter, they're inspired. He was referencing ninjas and Fortnite's relationship, and he's always like, we want to have these heroes that play our game basically and push them forward. And you mentioned like helping creators improve and giving them alpha. What's like one tip that you would give any creator right now that you wish you would see in Web3?
I would say I'm the wrong person to answer that question. We're going to have both Gift and Jonathan, our community lead. They're going to be the tip of the spear on the creator engagement side of things, and they have a lot more experience in that stuff than I do. So I can make up an answer, but I would just be making it up. I have no expertise in that field, and in fact, I had a long meeting yesterday with a partner at Andreessen who was helping me get up to speed on understanding how to deepen these creator relationships and what to look for, and what good looks like, what bad looks like. And so I'm smarter than I was yesterday, but I'm still relatively dumb, and I'm still learning everything I need to know about the space so we can be more effective in it.
Well, I didn't mean it from like a overtly like critical lens or anything. I just meant in general, like as someone that scrolls around social media, right? Yeah. Like, what's one thing that you just wish you saw?
I wish I saw more humorous content. I think, yeah, our creators are really good at informative content, and they nail, like, some of our updates are more complicated and they nail like the explainers, like here's how to do X. We had a couple, like, I wish I remember this person's name, but there was one guy who was posting these like ridiculous, funny, whimsical videos, and we were sharing them around internally and we were dying. They were so funny. And so I wish we can have a little bit more like just top of funnel silliness versus just like, here's the thing that you should know. And a little bit more gameplay focused stuff, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I think it's all maturation of the space. We at Catalyst, we kind of tend to lean more into entertainment than informative. This is actually like our first real swing at like an informative show. We love doing like skits and stuff, and Clouds and I have been chatting about doing a Pirate Nation skit. So when we cook that up, I'll send it your way.
Okay, amazing. I mean, yeah, just from like a selfish standpoint, like I like that stuff. It just makes me laugh, and I want to laugh, and it also can just get a lot more views, and it has the potential for virality. I think it's unlikely that here's how to craft a galleon is going to go viral, whereas like some silly video of someone doing something stupid in Pirate Nation is much more likely. And so I would say just videos that are more engineered towards virality.
I like that. That's great feedback, man. See, you're qualified. I think, that's
yeah.
That's something I enjoyed hearing,
I mean, that's like, it's hard to ask, like, hey, make me a viral video, please. I want it to go super viral. Like, I want like billions of views. Can you do that? Cool. Thanks.
I mean, I think with
sorry, one thing that I learned yesterday from in this chat was that some of the larger companies, they work with their creators, and especially the earlier ones, to help them make better content. So we don't have infrastructure for that today, and maybe hopefully we will in the future. But they basically they try to facilitate and like teach, and they host workshops like, here's how you use these tools, because there's a lot of people who want to create who are intimidated or scared and they don't know where to start. And so it's about cultivating those early creator relationships. And, at some point in the future, we may be doing some stuff like that. But that was really interesting to hear, and it made a ton of sense for me.
I I agree. I think there's a lot of people that have like I can even use ourselves as an example. Like when we started, it was very bad. I still think it's pretty like mid as far as our content goes. I would like for things to be better. All of us at the team were like very transparent with how we feel about our content. And it's like we haven't reached our taste level yet. A lot of that sometimes comes to software, sometimes it comes to the restrictions of being remote amongst the team. But being in a place where you can actively like discuss content and even admit like, hey, this video might have performed, but I wasn't happy with it because I didn't get to achieve this goal, is like very important to making better content in the space. So hearing that you guys are gonna start tackling that in the future makes me excited, because I think like Onchain has, for example, like fully on-chain games in general have this very like heavy stigma around it where it has to be overtly nerdy, and it's like it doesn't need to be.
I think we talk about this a lot. We believe in fully on chain, but we don't care to talk about fully on chain. When we start going after a Web 2 based audience, we are definitely not going to lead with that. The tagline they would say is like, no one cares that your game is on AWS, right? Like they just care
Yep.
that the game is fun. So we're going to showcase what's possible. They're going to see different game modes, and hopefully they will understand and benefit from the ownership aspect of the game. But we're not going to tout like the server side. I know we don't run servers, but the server side information, like it's just not interesting. We're just going to say, hey, you can transfer stuff to your cousin if you want. And that we think is the superpower. And like how it works or why it works, like that's just be magic for them. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and I think you guys do that really well though. In my experience of playing the game and seeing how you guys are scaling the on-chain side of things, I don't think that future is very far away. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Do you have time, or do you need to go?
I can go a little bit over. Yeah, we can keep going a little bit if you have some more
All right,
questions.
cool. Yeah, I just want to wrap it up tastefully. I don't want the edit to be like brash at the end, but I'll start wrapping it up.
Well,
And
I'll tell you, I
I
read through that Mr. Beast document. I don't know if you've read through that yet. His like onboarding document that he wrote 5 years ago for everyone who joins Beast Entertainment. And if you haven't read it, it's excellent. One of the
have to
tips,
read that.
yeah, you should definitely read it. It's worth it, especially as a creator. One of the tips in the video and for making an engaging video is to end it abruptly. So you just like end it right here. You'll get better views. Like even in the middle of my sentence, you can just cut me off right now. But that was like a major tip for how to like keep engagement high throughout. You just like abrupt endings.
Abrupt endings, got it. All right, we'll have to land on an abrupt ending.
Also, like thumbnails with expressive faces. I really consumed this document. Like I learned a lot. It's like silly stuff like that. And if you look at Mr. Beast stuff, like you can see that in practice.
I always make fun of my homies that do the YouTube thumbnails because they always, they're always like, and I'm like,
it's not quite coming through on your avatar, but I can guess what you're doing.
Yeah, they have the mouth open and they're like either closing their eyes or putting up their arms or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm just like, man, how does it feel being a grown man doing that? And they're like, whatever, man, it's for fucking views.
And you have to do all caps. Like, you'll never believe what Adam Fern said about, some controversial topic.
All right. So I know you mentioned that you didn't want to talk about you don't want to talk about on-chain when you're talking to like the masses, but for the sake of open source, right? Like, how do you think on-chain creates a potentially more fun game loop?
So I think the fact that you own your stuff and you can buy and sell is really interesting. There are other games that enable this. There are other games that have this feature, but it's not enabled natively, and it's actually technically against the terms of service. So like your gold farmers in WoW, if you're caught, they kick you out. Like you're bad. We're like, if you want to harvest gold and be the gold seller guy, like go right ahead. Like that's fine. Another example is a lot of gamers really care about fairness, and so we're able to showcase by default that everything is provably fair because everything is auditable. It's all there for the taking. Check it out. You can see what people are doing, what they're not doing. When there's people who are cheating in the ecosystem, there's some people who have taken up, armchair detective status in our ecosystem. They're trying to find extractors or botters or multi-accounters. We don't tell them to do this, but I guess they enjoy it. And because all the data is like fully open, they're able to identify the patterns. They can see them. They report them to us. They're like, hey, this guy, bad hombre, you should look into it. And we're like, okay, thank you. We'll take a look at it. And a lot of the time they're right. And sometimes they flag some, like one of our like internal systems that's like moving stuff around. And I guess it looks shady to them. We should probably label it. And it's cool to see how people engage in the different functions of fully on chain. I have another example. I have a friend's daughter who's 9 years old. She's playing the game. She was struggling to get faded maps for a while. I have way too many faded maps. I just like sent her like 50. And I was like, here you go, like a starter pack. And as far as I know, you can't really do that in other games. If at some point in time, like I'm like, I don't really care about playing Pirate Nation anymore, or I don't like this skin, it doesn't vibe with my aesthetic, I can sell it. I think that's really cool that I can just like transact freely in our ecosystem. And I think the last piece is what we sort of started with, which is the UGC. I think that's really important. Like we're building this thing, and there's other people building on top. We have, one of our builders is building a company called Taverns, and Taverns is where people are racing for time. They're building decks. They're seeing, what the enemies that are coming up because fully on chain. People are sharing strategies for how to beat and building. It's like, hey, this is the deck that I use to beat the level 5 gauntlet. You can copy it. That's not something that we would necessarily ever build. Like I would say never, but that is a feature that is now exists in the world that makes the game better. And that is something that is possible because of on-chain.
Yeah, I resonate with being able to send people stuff. WoW, for example, is a game that I've spent like 18,000 hours in. And it's really hard with every expansion to get my friends into it because the game becomes increasingly more like complex for the new gamer. I would say Blizzard does a good job at trying to streamline the process, but even now, like I got a bunch of the homies at Catalyst to play with me the other day, and they're like, "What the fuck am I doing?" And like it would have been so much easier to just be able to send them shit and just be like, "Just hop into this dungeon with me," like, like your gear sucks. That's why you keep dying. So yeah, I definitely relate to that aspect of it, and I think that's a pretty cool story. Like a 9-year-old girl just needs some maps. Like boom, there you go. Here's your maps. Have fun. Go crazy. Become a pirate. I and you mentioned taverns, right? Like the thing that I find interesting about on-chain is the scalability. Is like there's two forms of scalability. There's a scalability of the ecosystem because everyone's building on top of it, and then there's a scalability of the chain itself, right? Like it's no secret that Pirate Nation has had such a rabid player base that you guys had to shut down access for a while, right? And you're like you launched the boss chain. Like how do you guys look at the scalability side on the tech stack side of it?
That, I mean, honestly, that really sucked. Like shutting down growth really was painful. And what happened there was, I think, it was like damaging to the company's reputation as well as just the community vibes, because what happened was we got overwhelmed with players, both like real and bots, and so we had to implement a waiting room. And then we found out that people were bypassing the waiting room, and the lines were 6 hours at their height to get into the game. And like, listen, I think Pirate Nation is fun, but it's definitely not worth waiting 6 hours for. There's very few things in life that are worth waiting 6 hours for. Pirate Nation, not there. Like baby, yeah, like getting a new kid, yeah, 6 hours. Like maybe like the best restaurant in the world, 6 hours. Not Pirate Nation. Not yet, at least. And like our good players, the people who are loyal, who are hanging around for a while, they just gave up and they left. And I don't know how many of them came back. hopefully some of them, and like the botters and the the farmers, like they remain because their time is valued differently. They're time rich. And we built this boss chain not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We're not like in the business of like trying to build blockchains. Like we're in the business of building a fun game. And the blockchains that we had to build were a function of our success, and it's also part of our strategy of like building tooling that is scalable for games, because most successful games will have millions of players, and right now in its current form, like there was no EVM compatible blockchain that was able to handle that level of volume. So this was an important and foundational step to get us to the next phase. But it took a couple months. We lost community trust. People couldn't get in, and like it was really painful for us. It was painful for the community. And now we have Boss Chain up and running. We're ready to go back into growth mode. But when you're building when you shut off your growth engine, you lose that flywheel effect. You lose that top of funnel excitement. People leaving the ecosystem out of fatigue or frustration meant that we lost that big buzz we had around us. Like there was like people were talking about us all the time. They were excited, and that sort of dies down, especially because attention is really hard to come by in the space. And so we are now kickstarting that growth machine again, and it's a slow moving wheel. Like it takes time. You have to invest in it, and then you have to get it running again. And so we're back in that stage again of starting to grow, but we need to grow the right way. Growing DAU through inorganic bot activity is not the way we want to grow. There's a time and a place for that sort of behavior, but it isn't accretive to our ecosystem, and so we don't welcome it. Other games don't care if they have 80% bots. We care. And so like we could just be like open season, everyone just come in, spin up your bot and go have a crazy day, but that's not what we're trying to do. And so growing good DAU is much harder than just growing DAU. And we also know that the more people that are in the game, the more fun the game becomes. The more the marketplace is dynamic, the more the decisions tree becomes unique. So our number one focus right now is like filling up Boss Chain with the right types of people.
And do you guys? I didn't realize it had that much of a negative impact. I almost thought it was kind of like a bragging right. Like here, there are certain people that can't get players.
It's bullish in the sense that we had more people who wanted to come in the club than we could fit in the club. But if you look at popular, you grew up in New York, you said, you look at popular clubs and you look at their ratings on Google Maps and they're like 3 stars. And it's like the doorman didn't let me in. I waited for 3 hours, and then by the time I got in, it sucked inside, or like, and so we don't want to have, 3 stars on Google. We want to have a 5-star rating. We want people to have a great experience. We're trying to entertain people. We're not trying to make them wait. And so we as a team had a lot of empathy, but our hands were tied. We were building a new system that never previously existed before. It's extremely complicated, and it just takes time. I can't just snap my fingers. People are like, just turn on another server. I was like, I wish I could just turn on another server. But we were building an interoperable set of blockchains that can interact with each other. Okay. So that takes time because no one's ever done it before. But now it's been done. We know how to do it, so we can scale again. And now we just got to get the people again. But people are pissed off, and they're rightfully pissed.
In regards to the club comment, skill issue, man, you got to know the homie inside. But I know that doesn't work quite the same for Pirate Nation or the situation that you guys had. Are you guys like now trying to front run? Like, let's say more explosive growth happens and Boss Chain becomes filled up. Like, are you actively now basically trying to front run having the same issue reoccur? Or?
We shouldn't have the same issue again. We'll be a lot more thoughtful about our growth. We still are in control of our growth levers. We just let them get away from us. We basically allowed for like unlimited referrals, which was a mistake. Frankly, we should have been a lot more thoughtful about how we did referrals and the referral incentive system. And so like that won't happen again. What my understanding is from chatting with engineering is going from 0 to 1 blockchains was hard, right? We were on Nova, then we migrated to proof of play Apex. Going from 1 blockchain to 2 blockchains, so that's going from Apex to Boss, was like really hard. Going from 2 blockchains to 3 blockchains should be the easiest of those 3 things. And I've been told that we can spin up a new chain in a matter of like days or a week. and we would anticipate the need for it while we're spinning it up versus scrambling to build the technology, after the fact. So if we see we're growing at a really rapid clip, so much so that it's going to outpace what we can do on Boss, then we would start the work to spin up the C chain so that when we hit the cap, we move all the new players over to C chain and we're good to go. So that is like the plan going forward, but it took a few months to get to that point.
All right. Well, here you have it, guys. If you're building a fucking popping game, no unlimited referrals. Chill with this shit.
Yeah, no unlimited referrals, especially if you have limited server space, and don't incentivize the points where people will just refer themselves into infinity. Don't do it. It was a very easy mistake in hindsight to see, but we were so excited about growth, and when you see the levers moving, like you kind of keep juicing it. But lesson learned.
I mean, shit happens. Dith is back at it again with the bowl posting and talking shit on the timeline.
Yeah.
I fucking love it.
Yeah, he's great. He's great at what he does.
Now that you mentioned restarting the flywheel, right? What are you more excited about this time compared to the first time, right? Like from what you guys learned and shit like that.
Well, once we get the flywheel running again, I'm excited that we'll just be able to keep it running, right? I know the game is better when there are more players in it, especially when there's new players coming in. The game has been stagnant for a while in terms of DAU and just game features. And so I think having that new blood in the ecosystem will be a lot of fun for everyone because the new people will see everything anew and the OGs will be able to help them and provide guidance and mentorship. So I'm excited to see that relationship.
All right, before we go, one tip to a new Pirate Nation player. Go.
I would say watch the YouTube videos on Pirate Nation's YouTube channel. Show up to the spaces. Come to our Discord. For the most part, everyone is extremely welcoming, and I think it's one of our superpowers as a company is how amazing the community that we've built is. And so build relationships in there. People will help you if you have questions. They want to be supportive. I know that's many tips. So I think the underlying tip on all those is like really dive into the community and become a part of it. Like the game is one piece, but the people are really special.
Boom, you heard it here first. Check out the YouTube, get into the community. Peace.